I'm Jim, and welcome to the weekly message from Hummelstown United Church of Christ, right here in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania. We're the small church with a big heart, a place where everyone is truly welcome and where all can belong. Whether this is your first time joining us or you're a familiar part of our family, we're glad you're here. To learn more about our community, visit us online at hummelstownucc.org. Now, let's open our hearts and prepare for today's message.
In creating our table moment today, we're encouraged to think of the kitchen table as our dominant metaphor. And in speaking with Esther this week, she said, "Oh, I have a blue gingham tablecloth." And I said, "That's perfect. My kitchen table growing up had no tablecloth. In fact, I don't have an actual kitchen table growing up. We had a peninsula and then later an island. But it was certainly the place where our most regular weeknight meals of chicken nuggets and french fries might have happened. But also the main place where my homework happened, all the way through high school. In my family growing up, there were 5 members, and so each person was assigned a day of the week to prepare dinner. So doing homework in that place also meant talking with whoever's turn it was to be making dinner just over there, and those sitting at the recliners watching the evening news. So when we talk about a table of love, it makes sense to me that it's not about the food this week, though there is a fair amount of food on my kitchen table up here. Eating happens at the kitchen table, but also life. We learn and we grow when we gather at the kitchen table because we're allowed to be challenged by our assumptions and our expectations. And maybe notably for this metaphor today, this week, that kitchen table has no order of who sits where or pattern. There's no head of the table, no assigned seats. In fact, a folding chair held our oldest table member today. The table of love should be a place where all are invited to gather and speak their piece, to tell of the events of the day, to make plans together. Professor Israel Camazzano, Associate Professor of New Testament Studies, wrote of the passage from Romans that love is the grand ground on which everything grows and flourishes. But more work has to be done, especially towards humanizing the other. While hate and oppression dehumanize others, love, if well done and exercised, will give birth to a new world order, one in which healthy love can be nourished, can grow, and flourish. The grand ground on which everything grows and flourishes. That's a pretty great phrase. Love is that central and that unifying that it can allow us to grow as a species. Paul says, "Owe no one anything except to love one another." Our job as a church family is to encourage that kind of growing, to use our gifts of place and time to bring more light to love and more love to light. Yesterday at the block party, I certainly felt the love of our neighborhood and the gift of the space that allowed us to get to know some of our closest neighbors. And by doing that simple act, we build upon our hospitality of last week into this place of love. But love isn't always easy. This kind of love means being open to starting a conversation that could be hard or uncomfortable. Like our youngest reading about sleeping around. As Jesus walked and taught with his companions, they inevitably would have had disagreements, breakages in their discipleship contract, right? And certainly it wasn't something that was going to go away upon his death. Conflicts in the family or the church can get under our skin and fester when fear or misplaced loyalty or poor communication protocols are used. when people talk more about one another than they talk with one another. Add some divided loyalties and power dynamics, and it can be tempting to just give up on any prospects for resolution of conflict in this life. This is human and natural. So, this encouragement to utilize this hierarchy of problem escalation that Jesus offers was likely an attempt to ensure that the early church felt empowered by the responsibility to deal with issues on their own because they knew where to address their concerns. But noticeably, when Jesus puts the conversation into not just an argument status, but a matter of sin, sin, in the way that we most often discuss it here, is as a breaking of our relationships with God. So if someone sins against you, it should be seen in that light of relationship, that covenant with God that Christianity has embedded into belonging to church. This isn't just about cutting in line or saying something mean, but about affecting another's God connection. And that part is critical for both persons in that disagreement to understand. That we can't use sin to be the cover for desire. Just wanting something doesn't mean it's someone's requirement to fulfill it for you. This is not wish granting, but humanity building, conflict resolution. We should want to see the ways in which others' lives live. We should want to support their faith practices and their engagements. And from this, we should be willing also to share the ways we live our lives and our faith practices so that we can be a symbiotic system of growth. As I grow, you grow. As you grow, I grow. These kinds of teachings also focus our attention more fully upon those who face the larger risk, who have the least power and the most to lose, who find themselves to be in a dangerous or vulnerable situation, often through no fault of their own. The process of truth-telling and accountability envisioned in this passage best takes place with careful attention to the church's call to protect the disempowered, the vulnerable, walking alongside in solidarity as they speak up about the harm they have experienced. Because the world is not a kind place, and yet we are all equals in the kindness of God. Jesus tells this to his disciples and encourages them to see their own place within the system as well. That line about binding on earth and heaven gets me every time I read or hear this passage. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. I would love to loose some things on this earth so that I might more clearly look for the ways others should be helped and aren't, in the hope that I might be able to fill that gap by telling them to bind and loosen the grip of the world upon the very real humanity that surrounded their community. Let water and food and housing be loosed in this life, that all people might flourish in the great ground of love. Let thanksgiving and encouragement be loosed in the world, that all might walk into their lives with gratitude on their lips, without the fear of one-upmanship. Let all people loose their gifts, that we might celebrate another's success and find new expressions of success together. And I know this sounds way too big, but remember that he also reminds us that when 2 or 3 are gathered, God is among them. It doesn't have to be big things that center us on the work of the kitchen table of love. It might just be presence or an afternoon of activity. And yet, it makes a difference in that moment, in that afternoon, in that lifetime. A yes on earth is a yes in heaven. Love is the fulfilling of the law. Love to begin and love to end. Love your neighbor, love yourself. Love, and be prepared to share that loved and loving self no matter what is before you. God is made clear. That divine presence will always encircle our efforts when we try to fit at the table of love. Amen.